Welcome to the 10th episode of our show, Pakistan, a hard country where we delve into the complex realities of Pakistan through the lens of Anatol Lieven's thought-provoking book.
That's right. We're continuing our journey through Lieven's analysis.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the 9th chapter, Balochistan, specifically spanning pages 302 to 329.
A really crucial chapter. You asked for this one, and it tackles a very complex region.
Absolutely. So our mission is to unpack its intricacies, pull out those key insights into, well, what's often a misunderstood part of Pakistan.
Indeed. Lieven's view here helps us grasp not just Balochistan itself, but also, some fundamental tensions within Pakistan as a whole.
We'll look at the tribal dynamics, the history, the roots of the insurgency, and that relationship between tribalism and nationalism.
All through Lieven's perspective, of course.
Right. You're looking for clarity, those aha moments, without getting bogged down. So let's jump in. Lieven kicks off with the historical context.
Yeah, pages 302 to 306. He starts by just establishing how important it is geographically. I mean, it's huge.
The largest province, right, bordering Iran and Afghanistan.
Exactly. Its location alone makes it incredibly strategic. But here's the thing.
What's that?
Despite the size, it's the least populated, the poorest. A real paradox.
Massive land, few people, deep poverty, but strategically critical. Why so sensitive, beyond just the borders?
Well, a lot of it is history. Lieven stresses that its current shape, its borders, they're largely a British creation.
Ah, like Pakistan itself in some ways, cobbled together for convenience.
Pretty much. Geographical, administrative, security reasons, it lumped together groups that didn't necessarily have a shared history.
So not some organic bloc entity emerging naturally. And that Durand line, the border with Afghanistan, that
Right.
must have played a role.
A huge role. It sliced right through ethnic bloc areas, creating those cross-border communities and loyalties we still see today. It wasn't just a line. It shaped identities.
Right. And Lieven mentions the state of Kalat.
Yeah, founded way back in 1638. For Black nationalists, it's sort of this lost ideal of sovereignty. A powerful one. And Lieven adds this poignant detail. Its water sources have dried up now.
Wow, that feels almost metaphorical for the loss of autonomy they feel.
It really does. And he also points to earlier conflicts, the British fighting tribes like the Bugti back in the 19th century.
So echoes of today's conflicts were already there.
These clashes cemented a sort of resistance tradition. But Lieven also makes a critical point.
Which is?
The lack of a single shared history or even language uniting all the groups within Balochistan. That makes a unified provincial identity really difficult to forge.
Okay, so lots of internal diversity.
No.
But Lieven still says there's a strong Baloch identity.
Oh, absolutely. But its roots, its primary loyalty, tend to be tribal and regional first, often stronger than loyalty to Pakistan as a nation-state.
Local identity trumps national identity.
In many cases, yes.
Yeah.
And this strong Baloch identity, combined with, real grievances, fuels that nationalist feeling.
What are the main grievances Lieven outlines?
He lists several key ones. A feeling of Punjabi dominance in Pakistan. The sense that Balochistan's resources, gas, minerals are exploited with little benefit locally.
Right, the resource curse argument.
Exactly. And also a feeling that their cultural and political identity is being suppressed. It's a potent mix.
History, identity, resources, perceived dominance. It all sets the stage for the insurgency. Let's move to that section, pages 306 to 308.
Right. Lieven is clear. Baloch nationalism isn't new. It's been around since Pakistan's creation.
But it's gotten more violent recently, more widespread.
Definitely. He flags a couple of specific incidents as triggers for the current, more intense phase.
What were those?
The alleged rape of a doctor at a military base in the Bugti area in January 2005. And then later that year, December 2005, a rocket attack on Musharraf's helicopter in Kolu.
Those sound like major flashpoints.
They were. But Lieven is careful here. He stresses that the actual details, the narratives around these events are heavily disputed. Truth is hard to find.
Propaganda on both sides, deep mistrust.
Precisely. But whatever the exact truth, these incidents definitely ignited a major escalation in violence and alienation.
So, given this escalation, how serious did Lieven think the insurgency was when he was writing? Was it about to topple anything?
His assessment then was, no, it wasn't an existential threat to the military's control. A serious problem, yes, causing instability, but not threatening the state's grip on the province.
But he suggests its future depends on something else.
Yeah, critically on how Baloch tribal society itself evolves. That's the next big section, pages 308 to 313.
Okay, so the future hinges on tribal dynamics. Will nationalism eventually override tribal loyalty?
That's the million-dollar question Lieven explores. He notes the government historically saw tribalism as, well, a nuisance, but manageable.
Manageable how? Through patronage, paying off leaders.
Often, yes. Bribery, cultivating relationships with key Sardars. But Lieven makes a really crucial distinction between Baloch and Pashtun tribalism.
Right, I remember that. What's the core difference he sees?
It's about leadership. Baloch tribalism, he argues, is much more hereditary and hierarchical. You have the Sardar, the Wadero, the Mir. Their authority is largely inherited.
Passed down, whereas Pashtun tribes are often described as more democratic, meritocratic.
Generally, yes. Lieven contrasts the Baloch Sardari system, eldest son to eldest son succession, that turban-wearing ceremony like coronation, with the more merit-based Pashtun traditions.
So these Sardars hold real power within their tribes.
Absolutely. They settle disputes, enforce norms. And Lieven brings up the concept of garat here.
Just honor.
Yes, but a very specific, intense kind of honor code.
Yeah.
Hugely important in Baloch society.
And tragically linked, as Lieven notes, to things like honor killings, especially concerning women.
It's a deeply ingrained cultural aspect, a major challenge. He uses that anecdote about Sardar Mumtaz Ali Bhutto's hunting party to illustrate the complex hierarchies.
That was a vivid story. Showed the power, but also the potential for things to break down.
Right, and it connects back to that long history of fierce independence Lieven mentions. Resistance to Mughals, the British. It's baked in.
A tradition of pushing back against outside authority, and tribal areas being sanctuaries.
Yes, places to flee state control. It underlines that tension between tribal autonomy and the central government.
So, strong tribes, strong leaders, a history of resistance. But Lieven also says Baloch society isn't united, right? Pages 313 to 315 talk about feuds.
Exactly. This is critical. Deep divisions exist within Baloch society, mainly through these long-running intertribal feuds.
He mentions Bukti versus Miri, Bukti versus Raisani.
Yes, those are key examples. These aren't small squabbles. They're often generations old, very bitter rivalries.
And these feuds complicate the whole nationalist picture.
Massively. They can lead tribes to align with a Pakistani state against their rivals, or vice versa. It fragments any potential unity.
Like the example of Nawab Raisani he gives, siding with Pakistan partly because of his feud with the Buktis.
Precisely. It shows how internal conflicts can undermine the broader nationalist cause, a huge obstacle for separatists.
It definitely makes things less black and white. What about religion's role? Pages 315 to 317.
Religion has played a part in historical uprisings, often tied to that desire for freedom from any outside control, especially non-Muslim control.
He quotes that Pashtun saying, doesn't he, about never being at peace except when at war.
Yeah, suggesting a similar kind of restless, independent streak in Baloch culture, sometimes framed religiously.
But he argues the Taliban haven't really managed to co-opt Baloch nationalism like they have with some Pashtuns. Why not?
Lieven suggests the Taliban have their own broader Islamist agenda and are focused on the complex geopolitics, especially Afghanistan. They aren't just an ethnic nationalist movement.
So their goals are different, wider than just Baloch self-determination.
That seems to be Lieven's take. It shows how even strong religious identity interacts with tribal structures and geopolitical aims.
Okay, now turning to Pakistan's strategic interests in Balochistan, pages 317 to 319. What's Islamabad's main game here, according to Lieven?
Well, with the Baloch insurgency ongoing, keeping the loyalty of the province's large Pashtun population is absolutely vital for Pakistan.
Because of the strategic location, the borders, needing allies against the Baloch insurgents?
All of that. And this ties into the complex relationship with the Afghan Taliban.
Quite sure, providing sanctuary.
Lieven suggests that's part of the calculation, though he notes U.S. pressure led Pakistan to be more discreet, maybe moving them north from Quetta.
A tricky balancing act for Pakistan. Managing the insurgency, Afghanistan, U.S. pressure.
Extremely tricky. And Lieven points out a risk. Cracking down too hard on the Afghan Taliban in Balochistan could alienate the local Pashtuns.
Potentially sparking more trouble. A real tightrope.
Definitely. It highlights how interconnected regional issues are.
Which brings us to the economic and geopolitical factors, pages 319 to 323. Energy pipelines.
Yeah, the potential for gas and oil pipelines crossing Balochistan from Iran or Central Asia to India. Huge potential projects.
But Lieven sees a catch.
He points out, quite sharply, that if these happen, they give Baloch militants massive leverage, prime targets for disruption.
Turning infrastructure into a weapon. What about China?
China's growing role is huge. Gwadar Port, CPEC, linking it to Xinjiang. China has major strategic and economic interests there now,
And how do Balak nationalists view this Chinese presence?
with a lot of suspicion, even hostility, according to Lieven.
Why? What are the fears?
Fears of resource exploitation, mainly benefiting China and Islamabad. Fears of demographic change with influxes of non-Balak workers basically being further marginalized on their own land.
The classic development versus local autonomy tension. He also mentions Iranian Balochistan.
Briefly, yes, there are separatist movements there too. While cross-border cooperation has been limited, the potential exists, which worries both Tehran and Islamabad.
Okay, so summing it all up, what are Lieven's final thoughts on the prospects for Bloc nationalism? This is pages 323 to 329.
His overall view is, well, realistic. He sees Bloc nationalism as real, deeply rooted in grievances and identity. No doubt about that. But he sees major obstacles preventing it from becoming a unified, effective movement capable of achieving independence.
Revisiting those key challenges, the tribal feuds, the hierarchical leadership that can be bought off, the lack of a single unifying ideology beyond resentment.
Exactly. He contrasts it with more ideologically driven movements elsewhere in Pakistan. It's too fragmented.
However, he adds a warning, doesn't he?
A crucial one. He warns that sustained repression, continued perceived exploitation, these things could actually strengthen nationalism over time.
Especially among younger, educated Balak who feel let down by both the tribal system and the state.
Right. A heavy-handed state response could backfire spectacularly. That's why he stresses addressing the grievances is so important to avoid further radicalization.
And this all feeds back into his bigger picture of Pakistan.
Yes. Pakistan, despite all its problems, shows resilience. But Balochistan remains one of its most persistent, complex vulnerabilities. A real Achilles heel.
So, looking at Balochistan through Lieven's lens, it really does feel like a microcosm of Pakistan's broader challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got the legacy of colonial borders, ethnic versus national identity clashes, the awkward fit of tribal structures in a modern state, fights over resources, demands for autonomy. It's all there.
It shows how history and current pressures fuel this constant instability in a place that's strategically vital.
But crucially, those internal Balak divisions are also key. They really hold back a unified movement. That's a vital context for understanding the region's future.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. How do these internal contradictions, this historical weight in a region like Balochistan, actually shape the overall stability and future path of a nation as diverse and complex as Pakistan?
It's a big question. Really makes you think about how these regional dynamics ripple outwards and affect the whole country. Something definitely worth pondering after this deep dive.